Back in the 1970s, I was not the attractive, confident, muscly man you see today. I was a skinny, isolated little loner. I didn't like the same music that everybody else liked. I didn't go to the youth club. I didn't have girlfriends. I did my homework. I enjoyed being at school. I pretty much did what I was told. Outside in the mining village where I lived was dangerous and nasty, full of kids a lot bigger than me who weren't very pleasant. I had a retreat, and it was here. And this is before Dungeons and Dragons. This is my life from 1972, really. These are my miniature figures from the Lord of the Rings game. And it's specifically for Lord of the Rings. I did Napoleonic wargaming at a club, which again wasn't exactly suited to avoid me getting my head kicked in by random chaps. For playing soldiers, when I should have been doing more manly things like vandalising the local shop. But wasn't really my cup of tea. And I liked reading. Tolkien and things. I liked graphic novels, or as the friends of my friends, as people around me might have called them, comics. But nobody else did. I was one on my own, really. The people at the Wargames club were all men. I didn't associate with them at home. I had my figures, I had a little table, and me, and my imagination. And the creative processes that led to the world I made are still playing out in the world that I still use. I started in Christmas Day 1966. I began the world that I now do my fantasy games in. It's changed a lot. I'm not saying it's the same world, it isn't. Why am I showing you this? Oh, because I suppose there might not be many of you who were gaming before Dungeons and Dragons, and you might be interested to see what we did, what fantasy wargaming was like before Dungeons and Dragons, why so many of the older Dungeons and Dragons players are also historical wargamers, because that's where we started out. That's where Gary Gygax started out. He was a medieval wargamer. He thought he was writing rules, chainmail, for medieval games. It was only his revolutionary system that enabled Dungeons and Dragons to come along. And here I've got my dwarfs fighting my goblins. Look, interestingly, I think the thing that Gary Gygax does in chainmail, which is the whole birth of the hobby that we love, is this, and it's a dead simple thing, right? Normally in a war game you have a group of dwarfs there, and they move as a block and they fight as a block, and if they attack another unit, the effect is on that block. But what Gary Gygax allows, and if you notice as well, these men aren't based separately, look. These are in twos. Some were threes, some were fours, some were ones. That way, if you got one man killed, you could take one off. If you got 4 men killed, you could take 4 off. If you got 5 men killed, because you got for 3 and a 2, or a 4 and a 1. You might be able to take a 2 off and put 1 back on, and so on. But it was for ease of movement for the units and to identify the units. And these are based in the same way that we based them back then. They're not individual. They're not based for dungeon role-playing games. But so what Gary does, he says, like, okay, what if this single man there, instead of fighting the block, that single man is going to fight that single goblin. Now, this is the revolution. Because now when I look at those figures, I can see that this dwarf has got a better weapon and he's bigger and stronger than the goblin. So now I can say, okay, maybe instead of throwing a d6 for each one, I'm going to throw a d6, but give the dwarf +1 because he's better. And if they are defending, the goblin's got a shield, so that might give him a +1. But the hammer is very strong, and that's probably a flimsy shield, so that's probably going to cancel it out. And those discussions lead to someone saying, what if we could have a hero? What if this king is a dwarf hero king? Now what do we give him? What if he's not a dwarf king? What if it's King Arthur? What if it's a dragon? What if it's a giant? Once you make that jump, the individual figures can have different characteristics to each other. You've stepped away from the block wargaming systems of the pre-Dungeons and Dragons era, the Wargames Research Group, Bill Lamming. You've stepped into something totally new. And in stepping into something totally new, you allow the growth of a brand new game. Dungeons and Dragons was a revolution to me. It allowed me to be on my own, as I am now, and to play. And even now at 70, I talk to myself. I have epic thoughts about the wars and the worlds I'm playing in. I listen to music that reminds me of the 70s. It's a big nostalgia trip, I know it is. But as a 14, 15-year-old boy, these little friends here kept me sane. And they allowed me to be creative without knowing that there were other people being creative. I'm sure some of you who were around in the early 70s had peer groups who played the game. I didn't. It wasn't until sixth form and then into college that I finally realised that I wasn't the only person interested in this. And I started to meet people my own age who were interested in this. And again, that was another step forward. But for the start, before Dungeons and Dragons, this was how I would spend my moments, hours of spare time. And it's a fantastic way to spend your spare time. And I still, today, 50 odd years later, go back to these very games and play with the very same figures in the old-fashioned way. I hope you liked it. There's no great moral here. I'm not trying to say, look, do this. It's too late anyway. 50 years past, you can't. All I'm saying is, there was fantasy before Dungeons and Dragons. If you look at the comments people are making to the channel, and thanks ever so much for the comments, they are teaching me a lot, they are encouraging me a lot, they are bringing us together as a community, which is what I hoped for, I think. What I'm learning is that you've all got experiences that are valid. I'm not trying to say my experiences are more valid than anyone else's. I'm definitely not saying that my opinions are more valid than anybody else's, because I know they're not. I'm just being honest, and hopefully that'll entertain you, and hopefully that might make you think, oh, you know what? Yeah, I might share my experiences with him. And it is a platform where I can safely reveal that throughout my life I have been an idiot. And with that, I'm going to say, ta-ra, chuck.